We're here today with Dazza Greenwood, the Executive Director of the eCitizen Foundation, and we're here to talk about NSTIC, which is
It's the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, of course.
And I want to start off by just discussing a little bit about what NSTIC is and why it matters to people. So,
you know, the topic of online identity may sound kind of obscure, but every time you go onto the internet or onto a computer and do something important, you're doing it under some identity. Maybe it's under your LinkedIn identity or your Facebook identity, or when you're at work doing something on a system, it's your employee identity on that system. Sure. But you're always using an identity, and it turns out that the identity infrastructure for our country right now online is not up to the task of all the transactions that we're doing. There's identity theft and fraud, there's privacy violations, there's things that are not interoperable. We have difficulty being able to find information, again, that's connected to our previous times we've used systems. And so what the strategy is really about is coming up with a coherent plan for the country that people building systems and using systems can rely on, so that when we build out this identity infrastructure, if you will, we'll be able to not only reduce those problems, but really get the full benefits of using computers and networks in our society and through the economy.
All right. When you say identity infrastructure, I think we need to talk about that a little bit. I don't think a lot of people understand what an identity infrastructure is. A lot of people think they're going to give out cards with numbers, or they're going to do a lot of different things. Talk to me a little bit about that. What is an identity infrastructure? Yeah.
Well, infrastructure is, among other things, a large, usually public or civic system or set of systems that are other activities and architectures are built upon, and that they utilize resources from the infrastructure almost like a utility. Okay. An identity infrastructure, you can imagine, would have sets of core services that a lot of different systems in private sector and in government could then utilize, and that it would be available nationally and fairly high levels of service.
All right, great. Why don't we talk about some of the core components of this as we get into this and see where this is going and what this is made out of? Where should we start?
I think a good place to start in this is with the individual themselves, because what online identity is primarily about is empowering individuals to be able to take more charge of their online transactions, their online life. Okay. One of the, I think, best statements within this new strategy is that individuals are the first priority of the strategy, it says on page 21, and really they carry that through the entire document. Okay. So the individual, among other things, will have access to services that they can use to identify themselves across a bunch of systems. So unlike a national identity card, where arguably you could get the same function, they've proposed something a lot more consonant with the American expectations, that we won't have a national identity card, but instead we'll have a competitive marketplace of services that, in this case, interoperate, so that instead of having 100 passwords and usernames, which in addition to being hard to manage for individuals, is also really bad for security and privacy, because of course they're more vulnerable when you write them down on sticky notes and when you use the same one and when you use weak passwords and hard to remember passwords. By having an interoperable system that works as part of a national infrastructure, we believe, and the people that wrote the policy believe, and the supporters of this policy believe, that individuals will be able to have more of a coherent, consistent experience across all these different systems.
Right. My next question was going to be, what's the experience that these people are going to have as an individual in this system?
Yeah. Well, one thing that they'll be able to have is an easy way to see, first of all, the identities of others, and also the identities of organizations that they're dealing with, and an easy way to establish whether an online identity provider is trustworthy by a trust mark. So trust marks are known to be a very usable way to, in a simple image, convey a lot of information. You sometimes see on a website a Better Business Bureau little seal of approval, or a trustee is another company that does this. For this identity infrastructure, there'll be trust marks also, so the user will be able to just see an image and know quickly that a lot of auditing and checking and certifications and security audits have occurred, so that it's trustworthy.
And who's making this?
Well, really, the plan is that the private sector will need to lead. The government has done its job, and it's in a fairly open and collaborative process with many stakeholders in the private sector and nonprofits and elsewhere and other levels of government. They've come up with a vision and a strategy in this document. What it calls for is the private sector to now create the services and the products and the new types of business models necessary to achieve the goals that they've set. And the goals are that people will be able to identify themselves in an interoperable way that's very usable and simple for the person, that has privacy protections built right into it, and that is interoperable. And then another important goal is that at the end of the day, what we get is an ecosystem, what they call an identity ecosystem in this case, where the providers of services and the companies that are relying on an identity, who are verifying it, the users, and all the different players are left better off in this ecosystem, that it's sustainable, that it's healthy, resilient, and it's capable of evolving.
Okay. What important facts about this document do users need to know right now? Do all the citizens of the United States need to know?
I'd say the first thing is that you can read the strategy. It's not secret. It's not a secret plan that's going to happen to you. It's published on the government site, and if you want more information about it, you can go to a website that some nonprofit organizations have set up for consumer education and for to encourage public dialogue and engagement, and it's nstic.us. Okay. NSTIC.us. Okay. It's for us.
All right. What are the next steps for this project? Where's it going?
Well, the government has set up a national program office to help organize this and work with the private sector and individuals and other stakeholders to build out the system. And that's in the Department of Commerce, and they've got a budget allocation for next year, so they can begin to hire some staff and maybe fund some pilots. The very next step, as they try to translate this strategy and vision into action, is that they're holding a series of workshops across the country. Okay. The first one will be in early June in Washington, D.C., and appropriately it will be about governance, the decision making and the people that will be coming up with the specific policies for these products and services. Right. The second one's going to be in Boston, looks like at MIT, and it will be on the topic of privacy and how really to create these structures so that they do enhance privacy at the end of the day. Right. And the third one rather, will be in September here in the Bay Area where we are now, and that'll focus appropriately on technology. All right. It'll be right here in Silicon Valley. All right. So those workshops will be in-person events, but there'll also be opportunities to participate online for individuals that are interested to learn more, maybe have some ideas they want to contribute. All right.
Well, thank you very much for coming out and talking to us about NSTIC today. We appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Again, Dazza Greenwood of the eCitizen Foundation. I'm John Romano. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye now.